Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes the war that remade the Middle East. Insight Forever War? Israel risks a long, bloody insurgency in Gaza. Chinese, Saudi central banks sign currency swap worth $7 billion. BRICS leaders, UN to hold video summit Tuesday on Gaza. Israel, Gaza, and the mass production of myths for mass media. The war that remade the Middle East. Foreign Affairs. The United States had a vision for the Middle East involving a defense pact with Saudi Arabia, normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and an ambitious trade corridor to counter China's influence in the region. However, this vision was upended by a Hamas attack on Israel, which led to a ferocious military response and a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The United States now needs to create a new strategy for the Middle East that addresses the Palestinian issue, constrains Iran's rising power, and reduces tensions in the region. To achieve these aims, the United States should build on its partnership with Saudi Arabia and work towards a grand bargain that could lower regional tensions and establish lasting peace. This includes ending the war in Gaza and finding a path to regional stability, as well as addressing Iran's nuclear program and creating a trade corridor to counter China's influence in the region. The United States must also coordinate its nuclear talks with Iran with Saudi Arabia's efforts to reduce tensions with Iran to ensure success in both areas. The United States' approach to the Middle East must contend with the challenge of Iran, address the plight of the Palestinians, and counter China's influence in the region. By creating a new vision for Middle East security that makes room for all actors and promotes stability, the United States can work towards ensuring lasting peace and stability in the region. Insight Forever War? Israel risks a long, bloody insurgency in Gaza. Yahoo! The article discusses the potential long-term consequences of Israel's military operation in Gaza, warning that the lack of a credible post-war plan could lead to a prolonged and bloody insurgency. U.S. and Arab officials, diplomats, and analysts fear that if Israel defeats Hamas and occupies Gaza without a clear exit strategy, the country risks facing a violent and protracted security operation similar to those seen in Iraq and Afghanistan after swift military victories. The absence of a consensus on Gaza's post-war administration has raised concerns about the potential radicalization of the population and the emergence of a new generation of militants, as well as the lack of a clear political path to resolution. The article also highlights the importance of a post-war plan for Gaza, emphasizing the need for a credible exit strategy and the creation of a Palestinian state. Suggestions for a post-war administration, including a revitalized Palestinian Authority, PA, or a transitional administration of technocrats, have been met with challenges and lack of consensus. The credibility of the PA, led by Mahmoud Abbas' Fatah Party, has been undermined, and there is skepticism about its ability to govern Gaza effectively. While the U.S. and its allies have expressed a preference for a revitalized PA to play a greater role in Gaza, there are concerns about the lack of a clear roadmap and the potential for a leadership vacuum. The article also touches on the U.S.'s diplomatic efforts and the challenges of selecting a future leader for Gaza. It notes that the selection of a leader for a post-war administration is complex, with regional players having their own favorites and interests, and emphasizes the need for a rejuvenation of Palestinian leadership. Concerns about the conflict spilling over to the Israeli-occupied West Bank and beyond are also highlighted, with warnings about the potential for wider regional implications if a resolution is not reached. Chinese, Saudi central banks sign currency swap worth $7 billion. Bloomberg. China and Saudi Arabia have signed a $7 billion local currency swap agreement for 3 years. This deal aims to strengthen financial cooperation and facilitate trade and investment between the two countries. The agreement reflects the deepening economic ties between China and Saudi Arabia, particularly as Saudi Arabia is looking to diversify its economy away from energy. This move also reflects a broader trend of countries in the Middle East, such as the UAE and Iraq, exploring non-dollar trade arrangements. Additionally, China's growing international prominence is evident in the increasing use of its currency for trade transactions. BRICS leaders, UN to hold video summit Tuesday on Gaza. Bloomberg. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will chair a video summit with BRICS leaders to discuss the Israel-Hamas conflict. The meeting will include heads of state from 6 other invited countries and United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. This will be the first meeting of the BRICS leaders since South Africa and 5 other nations were invited to join the group. Chinese President Xi Jinping will deliver a speech at the meeting. China is also hosting talks with Mideast diplomats to de-escalate the war. The conflict has resulted in a significant number of casualties and injuries, and Israel is insisting on a ceasefire contingent on the release of hostages by Hamas. The meeting comes after South Africa and 5 other developing nations referred Israel to the International Criminal Court for war crimes. Israel, Gaza, and the mass production of myths for mass media. Al Jazeera. The article discusses the use of a spin playbook by Israel's supporters to shape the narrative around the conflict in Gaza. The playbook, created in 2009, provides guidelines on how to speak about the conflict, with specific phrases and talking points to use. The author highlights how politicians like President Biden and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak have echoed these talking points in their public statements. The playbook also encourages support for a two-state solution while downplaying Israel's occupation and the history of Palestinian suffering. The author criticizes the use of the playbook to justify Israel's actions and argues that the truth about the conflict will eventually come to light. The article emphasizes the need to question the spin and deception surrounding the war and its root causes. Arab countries press China to support end to Israel-Hamas fighting. Financial Times. A delegation of Arab and Muslim leaders visited China to build international pressure on Israel to end its campaign against Hamas in Gaza. The delegation aims to achieve an immediate ceasefire, launch a political process for lasting peace, and deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. China expressed support for the Palestinian cause and opposed forced displacement of civilians. Despite mounting international pressure, Israel has refused to budge, insisting on the release of hostages held by Hamas in exchange for a ceasefire. The visit reflects China's growing influence in the Middle East, particularly through trade and diplomatic efforts. 28 premature babies evacuated from Gazan hospital arrive in Egypt. New York Times. 28 premature babies from the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza were transported to Egypt for medical care as a result of the hospital being surrounded and raided by Israeli forces. The babies had become a symbol of civilian suffering, with 11 of them in critical condition and fighting serious infections. The evacuation was described as extremely dangerous and was carried out under intense and high-risk security conditions. The evacuation also included 6 healthcare workers and 10 family members of hospital employees. The Israeli authorities have claimed that Hamas had a headquarters underneath Al-Shifa, a claim that Hamas and the hospital's doctors deny. The struggle to survive at the hospital was exacerbated by the fact that some premature babies had been born to mothers who were killed in airstrikes or shortly after giving birth. China welcomes Arab and Muslim foreign ministers for talks on ending the war in Gaza. Associated Press. China's top diplomat met with 4 Arab foreign ministers and the Indonesian foreign minister in Beijing to discuss ending the war in Gaza. The Arab ministers chose to start their world tour in Beijing, demonstrating China's growing influence and support for the Palestinians. China has a history of backing the Palestinians and criticizing Israel's settlements, despite growing economic ties with Israel. The Saudi foreign minister called for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid in Gaza. China has become more involved in international affairs, helping broker an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The goal of the minister's tour is to pursue a ceasefire and aid for Gaza. Israel's retaliatory strikes have resulted in numerous casualties and missing individuals. What we know about the hostage negotiations between Israel and Hamas. New York Times. Israel and Hamas are currently engaged in negotiations for the release of hostages taken by Hamas, with the help of Qatar and President Biden's deputy national security advisor. Talks are focusing on a brief pause in fighting, during which hostages would be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners. Israel wants all hostages to be released at once, while Hamas is seeking a full ceasefire, the release of all Palestinian prisoners, and the delivery of fuel to Gaza's hospitals. Despite some remaining sticking points, there is a possibility for an agreement, but it would require a government vote in Israel and faces opposition from some right-wing politicians. Japan seeking talks with Houthi hijackers of Red Sea vessel. Al Jazeera. Japan is directly communicating with Houthi rebels to secure the release of the hijacked cargo ship Galaxy Leader in the Red Sea. The ship is owned by an Israeli businessman and operated by a Japanese firm. Japan is also reaching out to Israel, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Iran to urge the rebels to release the ship and its crew. Israel has blamed the attack on Iran, but the Houthi rebels deny Iranian involvement. The ship was manned by an international crew at the time of the attack, and the Houthi rebels have threatened to target Israeli ships in the Red Sea. Hello, I am Dr. Six, your observer from the 6 Degrees world, bringing you the latest insights from around the globe. Today, we delved into the Middle East's ever-shifting dynamics, from the war that remade the region to the international diplomatic efforts and the human impact of the conflicts. The Middle East is a complex web of geopolitical interests, historical grievances, and humanitarian crises. The recent events in Gaza have once again brought to the forefront the urgent need for a comprehensive and sustainable solution that addresses the root causes of the conflicts, ensures the well-being of the people, and promotes regional stability. The articles shed light on the multifaceted nature of the conflicts, from the potential long-term consequences of military operations to the diplomatic efforts by various international actors. The involvement of major powers, such as the United States, China, and the BRICS leaders, demonstrates the global significance of the region and the complex interplay of interests. The use of narratives and spin in shaping public opinion and international discourse underscores the importance of critical thinking and a nuanced understanding of the conflicts. The human impact, such as the evacuation of premature babies from Gaza and the ongoing hostage negotiations, highlights the urgent need for humanitarian aid and a cessation of hostilities. In conclusion, the Middle East remains a crucible of geopolitical rivalries, humanitarian crises, and historical complexities. A sustainable and just resolution to the conflicts requires a concerted effort from the international community, a deep understanding of the regional dynamics, and a genuine commitment to the well-being of the people. Now, I invite you to share your thoughts. What are your perspectives on the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, and what do you think are the key steps towards achieving lasting peace in the region? Let's engage in a lively discussion. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.